Good morning, everybody. Welcome to My Stoic Circus. And today we're going to be today we're going to explore Seneca. That's right, Seneca, a ancient Stoic philosopher who brought a level of humility and sensibility to our average thoughts and our judgments. And today, exactly, are we making bad judgments? That's right. Are you making bad judgments? So, without any further ado, just give me a break and give me a moment, and we'll get going. Have you been making a lot of assumptions? Have you been making a lot of bad judgments, not making the connections that you really want, maybe with your family, with your work, or your friends, family, whoever it is? Have you been making a lot of bad judgments, assumptions, presumptions? Well, Seneca was really here to point out to us how we actually look at exactly doing that. He offers a perspective of looking inward and outward and understanding being in the place or not understanding the situation. That's right. So according to his moral letters 103 point was it 103 4b through 5a, he says when philosophy is wielded with the arrogance of stubbornly, it is the cause of the ruin of many. Let philosophy escape your own faults rather than be a way to rail against the faults of others. Whoa. Now, what does that exactly mean? He that's what this show's really all about today. We're going to explore what actually is taking place. That's right, what's taking place. So, have you been in a situation you walk into and you say something that you necessarily didn't doesn't really match up, or maybe it rubs people the wrong way because your perspective is on a narrow experience. And when we look at that narrow experience, that's where we have to say, okay, before I say another word, what do I do? Well, the first thing in any situation, in any level of connection that you want to really make, you've got to take on the perspective of what am I actually engaging on? What am I listening to? Am I only listening to the first 3 seconds? And Seneca really points out a lot about that. He talks about how you can look inward, but also try to understand outward what is actually taking place. Maybe you have the experience, but you can't necessarily rob the experience of the other individual. Maybe it's not a situation that you necessarily wanted to be in after you stuck your foot in your mouth. I've done that myself. And I look at how he portrayed in his quote, when philosophy is wielded with arrogance, that means you're thinking your perception is right and there's no other way. That when you're being stubborn and you're not really looking at the experience or the discovery of another, you may be hurting yourself, which really interrupts the connection that you're trying to make, right? Well, that's also leading when I say right. Well, I hope it invites you in the understanding of that thought. And when I think about his next few lines, it's like, let philosophy escape off your own faults. Okay, before I invite my faults and my bad judgments or my bad position, let me see what others have to say. Offer and invite them to some insight according to my experience, maybe my thoughts. I'm thinking about this. These might be critical ways that can break the ties or bad judgments on you and the situation. A lot of times, I feel that when I've been stuck in these situations, I can take just a moment to really listen instead of react. And these are careful words used all the time. So let's look at actually what are, excuse me, a frog in my throat, you know, reaction, reaction as defined, definition, an action performed or feeling experienced in the response to a situation or an event. Now, if I take that part of the word, it's that means it's going back. And then the action that's going forward. Something happened, something took place. But if I don't initially respond to the impulses of what's taking place, then maybe I give myself just enough space to be able to say, you know what, maybe this thing or this dilemma, this debate, this situation, maybe in the news or how someone's feeling, is not really mine to deal with. Sometimes we just invite ourselves way too much. In our current society today, a lot of us give a lot of impulsive reactions. But what if we reserve our impulses and we reserve our thoughts just in a way where we can actually get the value and we can also be an asset to whomever we're attending to. When you greet somebody, how you doing? Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Greet with the pleasantries, but stay to the point, right? Learn to be able to listen. If someone's walking into a conversation or a perspective, maybe you're walking into to be interviewed. That's another thing. Many people I've experienced with, and I've experienced a lot of interviews myself, and coming ill prepared for the situation. And what could the situation? You could be up for a job promotion or getting a position or, having an investor come in, maybe inviting to a brand new group. And the first 5 minutes of your conversation really set the tone about how people are going to look at you, but also you looking at the situation. It doesn't mean to take arrogance or a false sense of esteem to say, oh, well, I know, and according to this, and da. You can simply say, you know what? I'd love to hear your perspective on this. Listen, take a moment, see what they have to say, you know, and sometimes just even asking for permission. If you don't mind, would you care to be interested in a different perspective? And if they say no, okay. Keep it concise and limited. Why is this so important? Well, Seneca really talks about how to be humble within yourself, how to really reserve just careful points. You don't need to give long explanations or verbose wordplay that makes you look smart in a way, but you sound stupid. I've seen that, done that, been there. But now I actually like to reserve my thoughts for myself. And this is exactly why I don't share necessarily my goals and my ambitions to everyone, only to the qualified individual that can help me along. So, really, when we look at are we making bad judgments, ask yourself, what do I actually understand versus I don't know anything about this, but it definitely stirs my attention, stirs my feelings. Your feelings can interpret a lot of things in a bad way, but it's really up to you how to translate something different. Look to learn from someone else before you provoke the situation, is really what it comes down to. And I look at those key points. I'm not here to provoke the situation. But what about when someone's committing to false provocation, making bad statements and they're very over sensitive or sensitized. They're very like just full of lies. Well, ask yourself, whom are they talking to and what level of qualification? Observe the situation. Look at people's body language. People are easy to agree when they find commonality, and that might be in their feelings, their anger, and their frustration. For example, we've seen in the news what's taken place between Israel and Palestine or Ukraine and Russia. We have feelings here in the United States to those things. Why? Because it's either relating to the economics, it's either relating to the religions, or how people are treated overall. People are bombed and killed, or people are stolen and kidnapped. Who's right and who's wrong? Well, I like Jack Canfield, where he says in his book, he says, event plus response equals outcome. That comes from the same guy that wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. He looks at it and says, well, if there is an event and I look at the response, then more likely I understand the kinds of outcomes, or I may not. And some people will say, well, you've got to understand the history. They're right by fighting this way. No one is listening. And my same response to when something is like really like an atomic situation, look at actually what is taking place. And more than likely, it's in a disagreement of mindsets. So before you put yourself in a bad argument or picking a side, pick the side of being impartial. Observe. Maybe it's not your fight. Maybe it's not your disagreement or your position. You can move on. And that's Seneca. He really talks about that and looking at the directions that we actually can live with. You know, it's the task within ourselves to understand what is taking place. Maybe you're not the best, or say, like, maybe you're not the best at conversation and you wonder why you're constantly being misunderstood. Do you commit to the practice of good, healthy conversations? Saying less than necessary is always a key for me. And I've learned this from many different writers, many philosophers, influencers, writers, all that. I learned to, like, okay, what is the situation at hand? What am I dealing with? Do I need to attend this? And if it's not something I need to attend to, thank you for your situation. I have no opinion. And I recently, out of my own example, I had a friend who reached out to me and proposed that I should write a petition letter for the United Nations according to the atrocities. Well, I'm not going to do that necessarily and so hastily. Why? Because if I don't fully understand the situation, I don't need to write in a petition. Though I am against war, I'm against violence, I'm against, people hurting each other, really. But I'm also up for standing up for yourself. And how do we do that? Some people feel when they're not listening to you, you've got to commit to some level of violence. And that may be true for some and not for others. But for me, I want to understand before I put, so to speak, a dog in the fight. What are we looking at? Do I need to make that judgment? And governments and people and religions, they will be quick, and businesses, they will be quick to make that assumption. And what is assumption and presumptions? Let's look at real carefully. I'm going to type up the definition of assumption. So, assumption, keyword. Okay, assumption is defined a thing that is accepted as true or as certain to happen without proof. Ooh, definition two. And I should share this on my screen. So let's exactly do that. So we're looking at Google, and I'm going to share my screen real quick. Let's see. All right, here we go. So now you see the dictionary, according to Google, they say, like I said, a thing that is accepted as true or as certain to happen without proof. The second one is the action of taking on power of responsibility. Those are huge things, if you ask me. Now, that's assumption. Now, what about presumption? And the reason why I'm bringing this up, because a lot of times we say words that we're not really uh, we know it, but it's like sometimes we need to take a little bit of time to review it and think about it again. Like, for example, when people say I'm a perfectionist, I don't know about that. you know, um, are you really a perfectionist? Do you do things until they're perfect, or are you just frustrated most of the time? So anyway, so presumption, an idea that is taken to be true and often used as the basis for other ideas, although it is not known for certain. Two, behavior of perceived as arrogant, disrespectful, and transgressing the limits of what permitted or is appropriate or appropriate, excuse me. So now that we look at those two definitions and we see what's actually taken place, now we can actually, oh, I didn't even show it in my screen. Duh. Come on, Jason. That's something that happened. So there's the definition of presumption, right? And now I'm going to show again assumption. So let me go back into the screen. I know sometimes it seems like I'm prepared, but yeah. So here we go. All right, there's the assumption. Now that we see what's actually taking place, now we understand. Or at least I understand, and I'm hoping you will understand what I'm saying. All right, there we go. Yeah, all these new features on Restream, I'm not used to having to double check and then share the screen. So, anyways, but getting back to the point of the talk is actually looking at what is taking place, right? When we look at what's taking place, when we're making choices according to the information provided or the situation we walk into, now we understand maybe just a little bit, just a little bit, my insight could be delayed. And by delaying, I invite no attacks or associations that I may not want to be in. And later I can join once I know more. Making bad choices is based on a couple of things. One, bad information, depending on your feelings. That's the biggest one. Your feelings, your inclination, what drives you to be exactly where you are. And like I said, the lack of understanding, but the lack of your connection with what you're actually saying. You could be saying something or thinking something, but saying it all wrong. And making bad decisions is based on those experiences. Remember, so the lack of experience or knowledge, you know, the way that you're saying it versus the way you're thinking it, and think about those things, go forward. So, out of today and going forward, I want I would like to encourage people to take momentary evaluations in any situation, whether it be your meetings. We've got holidays coming up here in the United States, Thanksgiving for some of us who celebrate it. Take a moment before you really speak one word. Take just a few moments to observe and observe the body language. Maybe it's a conversation just meant between one, two, or three people and not you. Excuse yourself, walk on, maybe move on. These can be remedies of what you can do to take away your invitation of making a judgment that possibly you don't belong to. And that happens all the time. So anyhow, that's all the time that I have for My Stoic Circus here live on YouTube as well as Facebook, Clubhouse, and I'll be probably publishing this for my podcast. Well, hope you all have a great day. Enjoy your week and think about, are you making bad judgments? Look at why, what can you do, and take an observance about yourself and do better. All right, that's all the time that I have for today's show. Y'all take care. Have a great one. Let's see.